Thank you, Chair, for calling this hearing on a topic of great importance, our nation's ice-breaking capabilities. We could have just as easily called this hearing iced out, but whether we're iced out or snowed in, we're stuck when it comes to ice-breaking capability. There's never been a more important time for the United States to maintain and expand its leadership in the Arctic. The region is rich in natural resources, including 90 billion barrels of undiscovered oil, 30% of the world's undiscovered natural gas, and 1 trillion in rare earth minerals. Depending on who develops these resources and how, the Arctic could either challenge or accelerate the global transition to clean energy and transportation. In the last decade, we've all seen the rise of Arctic shipping routes. Over 400 ships transited the Northern Sea Route between the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans, a route previously impassable without an icebreaker. However, this activity has been dominated by Russian-flagged vessels, and both Russia and China have jockeyed for control of the region. In addition, the region hosts a $3 billion seafood industry, increasing tourism activity, and critical scientific research missions. So to do any of this work in the Arctic, the U.S. relies on the Coast Guard and its icebreakers to represent our interests in the region, including leadership roles on international bodies governing navigation, search and rescue, vessel safety, fisheries, and pollution. Icebreaking vessels are critical for the Coast Guard to effectively traverse the treacherous polar conditions, provide access for other stakeholders, and complete its missions in the Arctic. Our presence equals our sovereignty. However, decades of underinvestment have left the Coast Guard with only 2 ocean-going icebreakers, the medium icebreaker Healy and the heavy icebreaker Polar Star, which has already been extended far past its regular service life. In conjunction with polar icebreaking missions, the Coast Guard is charged with domestic icebreaking in 3 of its 9 districts. The Coast Guard also needs to expand its domestic icebreaking capability and infrastructure to support that mission. Plans to home port the polar security cutters in Seattle necessitate improvements to Base Seattle, as Base Seattle is a gateway for Arctic missions and supports critical maintenance. So all this is a contrast to Russia. Russia operates a fleet of 55 icebreakers, including 18 military icebreakers. China also operates a fleet of 2 medium and 2 heavy icebreakers, with more planned for construction. These nations have recognized the value of the Arctic and invested heavily in securing dominance in that region. So make no mistake, the U.S.'s growing fleet disadvantage presents an existential threat to our interests, our leadership, and our national security in the Arctic. That's why the Coast Guard is working to replace and expand its fleet of icebreakers, including an effort to acquire 3 heavy icebreakers through its Polar Security Cutter program. Originally, construction of the first cutter was scheduled to begin in 2022 with delivery in the mid-20s. Unfortunately, we have reached the mid-20s and the shipyard that won the contract has been sold. The design is only 60% complete, and the Coast Guard has not determined the delivery date or the final cost for the cutters. It's important to note that acquiring these vessels is no easy task. This is the first domestic construction of a heavy icebreaker in the U.S. in over 50 years, which only underscores the need for continued investment in U.S. shipyards and shipbuilding capabilities. Without a robust domestic shipbuilding industry, the Coast Guard will continue to face challenges acquiring any vessel. That's why it's critical that the U.S. recently, in fact yesterday, signed the ICE Pact, a collaboration between the U.S., Canada, and Finland to share information and technology and increasing the supply of icebreakers for our allies. Leveraging these international partnerships is crucial if the U.S. hopes to increase production, reduce costs, and rebuild its domestic shipbuilding industry. However, despite repeated requests from this committee, the Coast Guard has also not committed to a timeline or cost for construction of the first Polar Security Cutter. So today's hearing is an opportunity for this committee to receive more information about the Coast Guard's plan to complete construction. I also look forward to hearing how the Coast Guard intends to improve its Polar Security Cutter program, including addressing the GAO's open recommendations. Finally, Congress has to recognize the Coast Guard will require additional resources in future years to complete construction and to expand its icebreaking fleet in the Arctic. While the Coast Guard has received appropriations for 2 vessels, that funding is now unlikely to cover construction for the first Polar Security Cutter. So, Chairman Webster and Ranking Member Carbajal, thanks for holding this hearing. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses, and with that, I yield back.